Hey everyone, welcome back. I am getting ready to use up the rest of my scraps, well, most of my scraps, some of the chipboard pieces I have left, and finish off my projects using this month's cards, tags, and more kit. I have a couple sheets left of uncut paper, but I really kind of want to focus on using the scraps I have left. A lot of them are really good size yet, so I'm just gonna kind of sort them and kind of get everything together so I can really see what I have to work with. Alright, I'm just going to turn the two sheets that I still had into a couple of envelopes, the max size envelopes for an 8x8 sheet of paper using my We Are Memory Keepers envelope punch board. This first card that I'm working on, I am using the stencil from last month's mixed media kit. And I am just going to kind of randomly put on some texture paste and then add some of the patina bronzed copper embossing powder that I had used in my Cottage Life frame from last week's project. Since I do still have some of those chipboard pieces with that embossing powder already on them. Alright, I saw Nick the Booksmith make some homemade glassine using tracing paper and a semi-gloss spray. But I didn't have any semi-gloss spray, so I used what I had, which was just that Mod Podge gloss and some tracing paper. And it worked out beautifully. I like it a lot better than using the wax method to make the homemade glassine. You don't have to worry about any kind of remelt or anything. Even though I had already sprayed this, I wasn't worried about the ink rubbing off because I am going to also be embossing these roses on here. But in this method, you could also print on your tracing paper before you spray it, and then it would just seal it all up. So there's my first rose, and I'm just using a Vicky Bouton set that I have in my stash, just because the roses in that set I think worked really well with the Graphic 45 Cottage Life set this month. I used the dies, the matching dies, to punch a couple of holes in the front of my envelope, and then I am just using my Judykins Diamond Glaze to glue those glassine embossed roses on the inside of my envelope, just to make a couple of little windows. I let my texture paste dry before I melted that embossing powder on. And then I grabbed up that Lindy's magical powder that is in this month's mixed media kit and just sort of put it on and dried it as I went and kind of brushed it out. And then I just used some kind of medium weight cardstock. It's die cuts with a few. It's from their linen stack. I've had it for years and years and years. I'm just, using up what I have right now. And I used that to line the inside of this metallic paper, which was from the same stack, just to kind of cover up any of the Lindy's Magicals that had gone on the other side, just to clean it up. And then I add that little framed bit of of graphic 45 that I had made last week and ended up not using with my framed decor piece, and popped it on the front of this card. This second card I'm working on, I have that green envelope already made up, and I am just going to add some lawn strips of paper across the card front. This little strip of paper, I had some cut up pieces of some adhesive sheets, and I had already just stuck some of the graphic 45 scraps I had down to them. This was one of them. I added a little bit extra glue because it wasn't completely covered with the adhesive. It was kind of hanging off the edge. And then I just added that on top of that green strip, just to kind of give a little break in between. And then I come in and I use the same color cardstock to stamp my sentiment on with some mowed lawn distress oxide. I give that distress oxide a little spritz with water just to activate it. Get it dried up, and then to add that mowed lawn on the rest of it, I just use my distress oxide spray. And I actually didn't originally mean to put that much of the spray on. I hit it too hard on one of the squirts, so I just kind of worked with it, and then I just watered it down just to get it to spread out. And then after all of that was dry, I just glue my sentiment on, and I wanted to kind of get that sentiment to pop a little bit, so I came back in and I just used a jelly roll pen and traced over the stamping. And then when I was done with that, I just popped on a few of those eyelet outlet gems that was in the June cards, tags, and more kit. So last month's cards, tags, and more kit, I just used some of those green eyelet outlet little jewels just for some accent pieces on my card front. Alright, these next two cards, I just use some pre-made cards and envelope blanks from Recollections, and then just sort of modify my pre-mades. When I was starting work on this one, I knew what I wanted to use. I just wasn't exactly sure how I was going to be working with it. When I was playing with the glossy spray and tracing paper, I had stamped that little image on and then colored it in with just some colored pencils, and then sprayed the glossy spray on it. And I was gonna make kind of a window, so I had already cut it in half. So with it already cut in half, I I really had no choice but to kind of finish that window scene. So I just cut out the four little rectangles out of the front of my envelope, and then added some of the strips of the graphic 45 to just kind of accent and highlight, especially since I had accidentally cut all the way across one of those crossbars. And then I figured, since I was already in the area, I split my horizontal paper. I added just a couple little I cut a couple little slots in it. That's what I was trying to say. I cut a couple little slots in it, and then I cut the end of the vertical one, and I just added some weaving so that where they cross, they're actually woven together. And then I didn't have a full-size piece of green graphic 45 left, so I just kind of grabbed up some scraps and used my Tim Holtz die with it just to see what kind of pieces I might get off. Used it to back my little squirrel scene, and then I decided I wanted to kind of add some blue sky behind that. And that was actually a pre-made piece of homemade glassine that I had made using the wax method, and just some I think it was the blueprint sketch distress oxide that I had used to kind of add the blue to there. I wrapped it around a piece of the graphic 45 cover that I had left, and stuck that in behind everything. And then I just really wanted to kind of finish cleaning up around the edges of my envelope, so I added some bits of the graphic 45 papers. And then just to kind of make it look like everything was the same size and to clean up the edges, I cut these little strips of paper 3/8, I think they were 3/8 of an inch, and then just lined them up along the edge of the envelope and stuck them down. My card front that goes with this envelope is far more simple than the envelope was. I just cut some rectangles out of the paper I had and covered that card front with them. And then just added on another one of those chipboard pieces that I had from last week that I didn't use, and a few of the Prima flowers that I didn't use in June. For my fourth and final card example, I used some Tim Holtz bird dies, the bird silhouette dies, cut out a bunch of the birds, and then came in and just used my hexagon punches, 1.5 inch and 1 inch, just to kind of punch as many hexagons out of the scrap pieces that I had. I don't end up using the little ones at all, but I do use those large hexagons, and I just kind of spread them out across the front of my card. then I just come in, I'm kind of working out how I want to do the birds for my card front, and I do choose to use one of each color, a pink, a blue, and a green. I glue them down, and then to kind of get them to stand out a little bit, I just hand draw a little line. I hand draw a line across to give them something to stand on. I come in with a Jelly Roll glaze pen and add some highlight to that line. And then I use some metallic jelly pens to outline the birds in coordinating colors, green, blue, and a pinkish color. And then I wanted to kind of give a little bit of shadow behind those birds, so I grabbed a dark gray jelly pen and traced around the birds, and before it had a chance to dry, I just used my finger just to spread it out a little bit. For the envelope, to keep with the hexagons, I used some hexagon dies from my stash and cut 3 different sized ones out of the front of my envelope. I used a piece of my homemade glassine. I don't put it in quite yet. I just lay it on front and kind of start trying to work out how I want to arrange the birds on my envelope. In the end, I add one of each color of those birds and make them so that they are behind my window cutouts, my hexagon windows. I used the hexagons that had cut out of the front just to reinforce the back side where there had been the pressure, just the pressure of those dies on the back of that envelope. I get that homemade glassine glued in, and then I come in and just finish adding some birds to the front of my envelope. Then I just grab up a bit of that homemade glassine and some stays on and make my sentiment for the front of the card. I used some Judykin's diamond glaze behind that, just so that it wouldn't really show up behind that glassine. Alright, I have 4 cards made up using this month's Cards, Tags, and More kit, the Lindy's from this month's Mixed Media kit, some items from previous months, and some items from my stash. I hope that you enjoyed these example cards and they gave you some ideas of what you can do using this month's cards, tags, and more kit. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up. Feel free to share this video. Thank you, and I will see you again next month.